Y'all ready? I now call this Bryan Independent School District meeting to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is 6:01 p.m. Welcome, everyone. Please turn off the sound on your electronic devices. And you want to say the pledges? Start with public comment on non-agenda items. Citizens may make comments about topics relevant to district business. Topics should be limited to 3 minutes. Comments concerning specific student or personnel will be held in closed session. I'm assuming no comments. All right. Our first information item, 2026-27 Budget Development Overview, Chief Financial Officer, Mrs. Norma Friddle.
Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, I think I'm mic'd up here. Is this too loud? Y'all can hear me okay? All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, board member, Superintendent Carabine. This evening, we will be going over our 26-27 budget development process, and you should have a packet like this in front of you. So I'm going to be teaching right completely out of this here, okay? So one page at a time. I'm actually just going to jump right in. This first page here should look familiar to you. We're going to begin tonight's discussion by giving an update on our current year budget. Then we'll transition to next year by going over some of the major drivers of state funding. We're actually going to be using all the tips and tools and acronyms that we've learned over the last few months' information items. You'll see a lot of those topics and a lot of those words show up in tonight's discussion. So if there are any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me and ask at any time.
Can y'all hear over there? We hear great. I'm just making sure everybody can hear. A little bit? Okay. All right.
I can pick it up just a little bit. Does that sound a little better? Thank you. Test, test. Test, test. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in. So the first schedule that we're going to go over is simply a summary of this year's budget. This form should look familiar to you. We go over it at our Finance Committee meeting monthly, and we also look at it occasionally just to kind of see where we're at. Our team does that internally just to make sure that we are trending exactly how we do this, just to make sure we know where we're going to land. So the first column that we see here is the budget to actual, the actual items that landed on the 24-25 budget, and that is the first pink column there. The next column is the adopted budget, so that you can see that was the budget that was actually adopted this year. And then the 25-26 amended column, that is this year's budget, applied all of our budget amendments that we've had up to this day and time. Thank you. Sounds a little better. Okay, so the top section that we see here is just local, state, and federal revenues, and you see those kind of across the line. So according to our amended budget, we're going to receive about $187 million this year. And the projected actual column is simply just the column that it's exactly what it says. It's where I think we're actually going to land. So what I do is every month I load our information according to everything that has actually happened. Revenues received, expenditures incurred, and I basically have an entire schedule that looks out all 12 months of the fiscal year and projects where I think we're going to land. So for example, our revenues, I believe we're going to land at about $191 million, And that includes all of the additional funding that we've received through HB2, which were the new funding allotments that were introduced. It also includes all of our property audit value revenue, the additional funding that we received for those property value audits. Okay. And then moving on to the expenditure side. As you know, budgets are adopted at the fund and function level. So, for example, you can see instruction there is the biggest budget line item, budgeted at about $110 million. And I believe we're going to land the projected actual at about 114. So function 12 is your library and media. Function 13 is professional development. 21 is instructional leadership. 23 is your campus leadership, so that includes your assistant principals, all of your office staff, assistant principals. 31 is your counselors. And just as a reminder, all of these expenditures here include payroll and non-payroll budgets as well. So I'm not going to read them all to you. I just wanted you to have them there so that you can see them. And you can see all of the budgets associated with them and where I believe we are going to land. On the lower bottom portion here of this report, you can see what our beginning fund balance was and where we project to be at the end of the current fiscal year. So the original budget that we adopted, we originally thought we were going to land at about negative $6.7 million. And since then, we have applied some budget amendments to the budget, just reflecting the additional state revenue that we received. So that deficit changed to about negative 3.1. So if you extrapolate everything, or if you estimate once you put in payroll accruals and all the other non-payroll expenditures that we think we're going to spend at the end of the year, I project that we will actually land in a positive state of about $2 million. I always put a range down at the bottom to make sure that, again, we still have 2 months left remaining in the year. So we just want to make sure that we all understand that that is a deficit range. So it could be as good as, positive 2 million all the way down to negative 3.1. Okay? And I never like to leave the conversation without just kind of reminding everybody that this does not include a possible contribution to our health insurance fund. We know that as of our last audit report, we are in a slight deficit there, so we just have to kind of keep in mind that anything that we do end up contributing to fund balance, we keep that fund in mind. So if we do end up contributing those $2 million to fund balance, that'll put us at about 2.74 months of operating expenses within our fund balance, which was a lot higher than originally projected when we adopted our deficit budget of about 2.2. So this is a very high-level summary. Again, we implemented this budget to actual this year to just have a better grip and a better understanding of where we are month to month. It is a lot easier to look at schedules like that when you have them 12 months in front of you, and you're able to predict and see the patterns and evaluate the budgets, monitor them a little better. And yeah, I think this has been a very good report for us to have. I'd be happy to answer any questions or. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
There it is. Okay. Sorry. So just looking at the state line items on revenues, it says projected actual, we're going to land at about 102. We originally budgeted 92 million, 92.6. So that's a difference of about 9.3 million. And I was just curious about what's the effect, or what items are in that are contributing the most to that 9.3 million?
Mm-hmm. Most of that is the additional revenue that we received for the property value audits for 23-24 school year and 24-25.
We said that was what, 6 million?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. We also just recently received about an additional 2.9 for the 24-25 fiscal year.
Okay. So those two numbers make up the large part of that 9.3 million?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I think that's all I had.
Okay.
My neighborhood, quick question. I'm just curious as to why it says at the bottom deficit range, and it's got the amount of the predicted excess, which is good, to negative 3.1 million. Why is that range in there?
The range is there because May and June are still not actually, they haven't happened yet. So I have to go in there and predict what I think the non-payroll expenses are going to be, what I think the payroll expenses are going to be. June actually brings in a lot of year-end payouts of retirements, additional TIA payouts, payroll accruals. So there's a lot to estimate there. Worst case scenario is the negative 3.1. Best case scenario is the positive 2 million. So we still have 2 months to go.
Okay, so there's a lot of uncertainty,
Yes.
obviously. Okay, well, but it's still room for optimism, but I was wondering where that came from. And I guess that was not what I expected, was that there could be that much difference over just the rest of the year, but you've explained that, so thank you.
We don't anticipate those property tax audit to yield that amount year after year, would we? I mean, I think,
No, sir.
$8 million chunk is kind of an extraordinary item to revenues. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Those were actually extraordinary items that we received this year, and those were one-time payments. So we did not count on them to receive them next year. But we can continue to file those property value audits. As you know, values change daily, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of, it might not be reoccurring in the sense that it's that much, but it could still be a reoccurring item
Yes.
to some degree.
Yes, sir. And anything conservatively that is or could or would be reoccurring is already embedded in our state funding numbers for next year. And I was very conservative with my estimates, so.
Okay, Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I don't know about you guys. Sorry, he's listening in. Talking about that, David, maybe it's because we're older, but we get daily mail about, would you like to challenge your appraisal? And I mean, I think we've gotten on the radar for all kinds of, I don't know if they're attorneys or tax challenge people that have just come to Bryan, Texas. But I think the population has begun to think that that's the fun thing to do every year, is challenge their appraisals, challenge their, so like what David was saying, I think, of course, that's just going to be a thing of the future. Where it wasn't a major thing years ago, it is now, and it's been made a lot easier, and there's people that'll do it for you. So I think that's an expectation we have to realize.
Yes, ma'am. One of the things I would also like to remind the board is that revenue is based, it's calculated every year, and every year is independent of each other. So to Mr. Stennis's point, we always have to kind of look and estimate what we think we're going to receive in that year. And just because we receive revenue in one year doesn't necessarily mean it's going to carry over to the next year. There's a great relationship there between tax collections and state funding. So if our property values happen to drop, Ms. Waller, to your point, because of protests or arbitration or litigation, that can also have a big impact in just our overall revenue sources. Any more questions before we move on to next year?
The health fund, that's calendar year, is that right?
Yes, sir. It's based on a calendar year.
So that's why you really can't put a number there, is that the reason?
That can be part of the challenge, yes, especially since it is on just a normal calendar year, and insurance premiums take effect January 1. And typically, if we, tell you the financial position of the health insurance fund, it's based on fiscal year.
So, but we did get some fairly positive news on the health fund. Is that still the case, that it's fairly positive?
We absolutely did, yes, Mr. Stasny, thank you for bringing that up. So first quarter of this year compared to first quarter of last year, we actually had a positive gain. So first quarter last year, we were about negative 300,000 or so, and that's just a reflection of premiums collected versus claims paid. So just overall picture, premiums collected versus claims paid. Last quarter was about negative 300. Same situation, premiums collected versus claims paid. For current quarter, we're about positive 300. So we made about a $600,000 gain. So that very, very excited about that. We're definitely moving in the right direction.
On the property tax issue, just want it noted that the school district has nothing to do with establishing property value. And as a homeowner, I know that my own property values have increased over 50% in a very short number of years. So to Ms. Waller's point about people protesting, I understand why folks do it, because it feels arbitrary perhaps and unfair in some situations. So wanted to make that note. In terms of the health insurance, they're on a different, health insurance is on a different cycle than our school district budget, correct?
Then our school district fiscal year, yes, ma'am.
Yes, so that's a January 1 start, while ours is a July 1 start, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's why the quarters may feel weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
that's why it's not, it can be a little difficult to give a financial position or make a comparison on July 1 or August 1. It's a lot easier to compare beginning January through December versus July through June.
But we have to make those offsets if we're deficit on the healthcare piece. At what point? Like, we're estimating that now for January, for December, January, or we make those offsets as we work on this budget? Does that make sense?
Making the offsets, I'm sorry?
Yeah, so let's say that we are in a deficit position on our health care.
Yes.
We're like we were last year. We had to put $2 million into that.
Correct.
At what point do we make those decisions?
Typically before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay,
Yes.
so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's why down here at the bottom, I always say projected actual is this, but we do need to make a decision if we're going to make any contribution to the health insurance fund prior to that.
My point is, it's not a full picture because it's on a different cycle.
Correct, yes, yes.
Thank you, Norma. I just want to applaud your effort and everyone in this room, because besides the property value audit, one-time revenue, everyone has rolled up their sleeve and worked towards the most lean and efficient operational budget that we can possibly achieve, not only for today's budget, but looking ahead to next year's budget. So just thank you to all of the staff, the campuses, departments, everyone. It's been a team effort, and it's been a good experience, I guess, having
Yes,
to
ma'am.
decide when, where, and how to cut the budget. So I'm proud of the work that you've led.
Thank you.
I also appreciate.
They're both on. Yeah.
They are? Yeah, it is. I appreciate the collaboration, communication, just involving all of us, the board, particularly in this process, to see these spreadsheets, to see them evolve throughout the year, to have communication and to some of the things that would impact the district, some of the challenges we faced, the communication that went out to campuses to get everyone on the same page. It was a good experience from despite all the challenges and the changes that we experienced, it was a good experience to see and be a part of the process. And over the last 2 years, in my third year, it's really the first opportunity where I've seen clarity and understanding of this process and everything that goes into it. And I think coming into approving the budget, I feel like we have a better understanding of where we stand, and I'm just greatly appreciative of that process. It's been good. Thank you.
Definitely been a process, yes, sir. All right, well, if we are ready to move on to 26-27, we can turn the page. And if we can get to our budget planning assumptions for 26-27. I did want to spend some time here because I really think that it's important that we go over the major drivers of revenue here. The very first one that we're going to go over here is average daily attendance. So before we even begin to talk about next year budget, one of the first things we need to decide is what average daily attendance or what ADA number are we going to go with next year? Because we adopt a budget at a snapshot in time, right? We look at all the information that we have in front of us, and right now what we have is we have a trend here, and unfortunately we have a downward trend. We have experienced a decline in our enrollment as well as our average daily attendance. So you can see here that the first 6 weeks our ADA was 14,523, and that quickly declined to 14,186 after the fifth 6 weeks. There's a little notation there that says plus special populations. So what I do to start the revenue process for the next year is I look at what our ADA is and the student counts of all of our special populations, GT, CTE, special education, our economically disadvantaged numbers, bilingual, all of those are special populations. So I run a report to see where are they at the moment. And then I grab those and then I feed them into the state funding template just to get a scenario of what our funding could look like or would look like using a snapshot of real, live, actual data, okay? So that is actually step number one. I took my average daily attendance and I used the fifth 6 weeks as my snapshot, and I took all of my special populations. So just as a quick reminder, that is why our PEIMS, or our Public Education Information Management System, our PEIMS data is absolutely critical and very important to this process. We want to make sure that we have clean data to go on. So I picked the fifth 6 weeks snapshot. So those are our numbers right there. Budget planning assumption number 2, major one here, tax collections based on the county preliminary values. So we received our preliminary values from both of our appraisal districts, Brazos and Robertson. And why does this matter? Why do values matter at the county level? And I'm just going to read right here. Property tax collections are a key input in the state funding formula and help determine the local and state share of funding. So again, to Dr. Harlan's point, we really do not have any control over our values. School districts really just kind of stand in the crossfire between really the county and the state. And we're going to talk about why that's important here in just a second. So tax collections based on preliminary values, and then major revenue driver number 3. Now, this is where the crystal ball really comes into play. I don't know if you remember, but Amanda Brownson's conversation at our last board meeting, she said, this is one of the most common reasons, one of the most difficult reasons why school district budgets are really hard to predict as far as the revenue side. Because, well, first we have to adopt our budget by June 15th on preliminary values, when we don't get certified values from the county until July the 25th, and then the state doesn't certify those values till February of the following year. So a lot of revenue estimations, projections here. I typically work with Ms. Brownson herself at the state level, and TASBO has templates out there to kind of help predict all of the values and what the state's going to do. But just overview here, what are state comptroller values and how are they different from the county and district appraisal district values? So the state values exist to ensure that counties are appraising property at market value, since lower appraisals reduce local tax collections and increase the state's share of school funding. So that's one of the main kind of fundamental concepts there. So the state really just acts as a mechanism to make sure that the counties are appraising at market value. Because what does that mean? If they're not, it means that school districts aren't collecting locally as much as they should, right? So then the state, it just means the state has to pay us more. So 2 different values for 2 different purposes. Appraisal values from our appraisal district, we simply use them to calculate our tax collections. The state values, the ones that are determined in February, those are the ones that actually predict more closely what the state's share is going to be, that $75 million. And if you remember from all the little pie charts and everything that we showed, literally between local revenue and state share, that makes up about 99% of our revenue, almost half and half. So it's just very important to make those notations, and that's why Ms. Brownson said that predicting what the state's going to certify can be challenging because we don't know that for months down the road. Okay, I'd be happy to take any questions before we flip on over. These are the planning assumptions, and these are the major revenue drivers so that you can kind of understand behind the scenes the methodologies and the thought that goes into the actual planning of the budget. Okay, those are the assumptions. We can flip over to the next page. This is the actual 26-27 budget overview and plan here. So right up at the top here, you can see that we used our average daily attendance of 14,189. Remember that number? That's the number that we picked up from our 5th 6 weeks. I anticipate our Tier 1 MCR, or our maximum compressed rate, will stay the same at about 61 cents. And if you remember Tier 1, golden pennies, Tier 2, you can remember those conversations from all of the strategic planning meetings that we've had, right? That sounds familiar. So because our property values did not show any growth, I predict that our Tier 1 tax rate will stay the same on the M&O side, 61 cents, M&O rate Tier 2. We've got 6 golden pennies. Remember, that's where our enrichment pennies live. We have 6 out of the 8 possible. So I predict that our total M&O tax rate will stay the same at about 67 cents. Local revenues, we're not going to go into too much detail here. I've put a pencil to how much I think, based on our preliminary values, how much we're going to receive on the local revenue side. Plugged those tax collections in and all of our student counts into the state funding template. I predict we'll receive about 94.7 there. And we did have a little reduction in federal revenue that went down to 200. So all in all, our total revenue for 26-27, I believe will be at about the $182.6 million mark.
Our next budget, let's add another one.
So trying to understand those revenues with average daily attendance dropping roughly 300 students, why did revenues go up? I expected it to go down. Where it says option A, actual 5th 6 weeks, so local revenue, adopted budget was 84 million off 14,486, and then if you carry it across, it's 87 million off 14,189.
Yes, ma'am. So some of those items there, for example, the local revenues, they include some estimations, like there's a GASB 96 entry. A lot of this budget, and I probably should have started with this budget includes a lot of right sizing and includes some of the items that we needed to make some adjustments on. There's some accounting entries that go in on the local side and also on the state side. For example, on the state side, we added the Medicare Part D, which is one of the items that hasn't historically been budgeted, but it behaves a lot like TRS on behalf. So it wasn't budgeted last year, but I would like to include it this year.
So while the expenditures have a lot of subcategories, the
Yes.
revenues don't. But
Correct.
there's things happening
Yes.
there that are not just a straight calculation.
That's correct,
Okay.
yes, ma'am, yes. I was trying to I didn't want to make this spreadsheet like 4 pages long. Just know that there are some items in there that were either not included, and it was just a personal preference for me to budget with them instead of without them. So that way we would have less compliance issues on the function side. Yes, but thank you, that's a great question. I debated on whether I should expand this to 3 pages, and then, but yeah, there's some GASB accounting entries in there that we captured.
Ms. Friddle, I don't know which page and I've been meaning to ask this. Are we getting any, if all, at all, oil and gas revenues in?
Oil and gas revenues. I know our minerals and our industrial, I believe they call them industrial production or something, we are getting some value out of that, but there was a huge value decline, like over 20% on the mineral side, which is connected to oil and gas production.
Right.
Directly
No, I
connected.
hadn't necessarily seen that anywhere, and I know that fluctuates.
It does, and in fact, that's a great point, because I met with our chief appraiser last week, and she made a direct correlation between the oil and gas production, and they compared January of last year to January of this year, and as you know, those oil prices were very different from last year to this year, and that's, interestingly enough, that's connected to a lot of the values of our minerals. It looks at that trend, so it's one of the reasons why minerals went down. Great question, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the expenditure side of the house here, this is where all of our staff and positions live. So, for example, 6112, that's where our nurses, we have nurses in class coverage in there. 6117 is our professional stipends, supplemental pay, professional pay. You can see a budget line item here. This was really 2 of the major items that had an impact here: net of budget adjustments and operational savings, attrition and program efficiencies. A lot of that is what we actually covered in a lot of our sessions, so we do have information on that as well. Here's extra pay, overtime. So again, these are all of our categories that involve payroll or staffing positions, a lot of our payroll taxes as well, some of our benefits. And then you can see that Medicare Part D, that line that says revenue offset. So there's a revenue offset on the state side for that Medicare Part D there. So on the expenditure side, payroll staffing positions, I predict that we'll be at about 155.6 million after all of our adjustments and modifications there. And then right below that is where you'll see our non-payroll budgets. Now, this year, we have met with the campuses. We've gone to every single campus and we've gotten budget feedback. We actually started the year and we implemented a new process. We piloted this new budgeting process with about 5 campuses, maybe 5 or 6 departments. So everything on the non-payroll side actually went through a very rigorous budget development process. We made sure that everybody's budget was vetted through the cabinet member. Every cabinet member here had access to every budget that was prepared. You actually saw an example of that budget in one of our informational sessions. Remember the one that had all the different priority levels that we implemented? So we actually did do something new as far as our budget approach this year. And it was really just, it exists now. There's greater visibility. There's more transparency into what we're purchasing. So it gave a lot of the budget managers just more insight into what we were purchasing.
That entire process, I think, has been playing out for a few years, where we've been going to the campuses. It's been playing out for a few years where we
campuses and having these conversations. And as I sat here and thought about what all's been going on, we've basically gone out over 40 to 50 times, either to campuses or focus groups or even student groups, and talked a little bit about what their priorities are, and then honestly asked their feedback. And we've done this for multiple years. We went out, I guess, maybe 3 or 4 years ago and started this process. I think we lovingly call it the Road Show, and we go out every year. And so I'm just thankful for the collaboration of the team, and I really do think it's paid dividends, not only in just the thoughts and the exercise itself, but also in just making sure that we do stuff with our group. And so from the teacher advisory to the parent advisory to the multiple strategic planning sessions to the 25 or plus different campuses or departments and the multiple student focus groups, as well as just the day focus groups, it's been a very worthwhile, and the feedback has been outstanding. So I just appreciate everyone's support in that endeavor, and I think Ms. Frittles, again, as we even developed the current budget and the old budget, they just, obviously, the end users have such an insight into that entire process.
Thank you, Dr. Merrill. So here are the non-payroll budgets. You see them, campuses, a slight decrease there. Departments, same thing. On the state program side, remember I mentioned we did a lot of right sizing. Some items were either left out. We want to make sure that everything is included as part of the process. So there was some right sizing there. District allocations, same thing. Made sure that everything was included. If anything got missed this year, we included it to make sure that nothing was missing. And we have a little energy savings there. We're going to be implementing a little energy campaign, making sure that all of our set points are adjusted there to see if we can realize some savings on that end. So all that. So we've got about, just here in summary, we've got about $182.6 million in anticipated revenues. We've got a total of about $183 million in anticipated expenditures for a slight deficit of $419,000 there. Now, if you notice, there's one last line there here, which is called option planned use of fund balance. So school districts do have the option to use fund balance to close budget deficits. But just in full transparency, if the planned revenues do not exceed the planned expenditures, it still goes on the books as a deficit budget. But for a communication piece, just to make sure we can close the gap, or the board can choose to use fund balance to actually balance the budget. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. We've got one more segment of the budget overview to go over.
It's on. Okay. It's a lot more fun when we could just blurt out anything we wanted to up there. What you just said, it just seems to me that's misleading to suggest that somehow that closes the deficit, because as you said, the deficit's real. It's all about income versus expenses.
That's
and
correct.
So all you're doing is using your savings. So
That's correct.
So I wouldn't want anybody to think that, well, we have that option to close the deficit. Not really. I mean, it's just that we will not be defaulting on our obligations. We just are using up our savings. So that's all I want to say.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Ms. Frittle, I know this year we reduced the deficit budget from the adopted $6.7 million, and I know there's a deficit range from $2 million in the black to over $3 million in the red. What is your opinion as the year progresses next year, if indeed the board adopts a $400,000 deficit? Is it true that we'll do what we did this year and we'll continue to chip away and do everything possible to reduce it throughout and possibly even balance it? What's your opinion, knowing the unknown, the uncertainty with the property value audits? That was very helpful this year, but we don't have that crystal ball for the future. So any opinions on this going forward regarding us possibly balancing over time.
Yes, Ms. Karen Bryan, thank you for that question. Just because we adopt a deficit budget or even use fund balance to close the gap, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will end in a deficit. As you recall also from Ms. Brownson's presentation last time, 71% of school districts predicted that they were going to have a deficit budget, but really only 41% actually experience a deficit budget. And that's because of all of the cost savings that you can also incur during the year. Every time we leverage attrition. We leverage attrition every time somebody resigns. We reimagine that position. We can possibly distribute duties. So again, just because we adopt a deficit budget doesn't mean that we're going to land there. We've done a lot this year, as Dr. Merrill stated, and it doesn't mean that we're going to stop. So the savings, we're going to continue to seek, and we're going to continue to speak to our employees and have those meetings, those conversations. Again, the simple flag or the simple switch of just not doing budget overruns, we've seen the benefits of just changing and tweaking some very simple things along the way. So yes, Ms. Carabine, to your point, just because we adopt a negative budget doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to end up in the negative. Thank you.
Ms. Frill, I want to thank you and the other 9 here, which I know everybody works hard, your staff too, that isn't necessarily in here. I know that you've given us so many different angles for budget this year that this is I don't know, I got on in 2015, and I probably understand more after this year due to you giving it to us in small little digestible chunks. And then when I don't understand something, I just look at my bookend bankers and David Stasny, and when they're nodding their head, that's okay. If they're shaking their head, then I figure they're going to ask a question. But I really appreciate everything you're doing, and I feel very confident. I know our leadership is having to make some really hard decisions. We're not going to try to lose anybody or put anybody out, but the road show is doing this and talking to our employees with grace and kindness as much as possible. This is tough, but I know the leaders in this room, the leaders on the campuses, the leaders in every department are treating people like they would want to be treated. And so I would just like for anybody that can hear this to know that we try to rule by the golden rule and try to treat our employees, parents, students, lead by the golden rule.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Waller. Okay, well, if there are no further questions, we can kind of turn the page here to talk about some compensation considerations here. Just wanted to clarify and verify and just let you know that in the 25-26 budget, just to remind the board, the 25-26 budget did include a $500 one-time stipend for all hourly staff, and there is the cost attached to that. And the budget currently also includes, bless you, the bus driver attendance stipend, which is, I'm sorry, the attendance incentive. I keep calling it a stipend. It's an incentive. Tommy's going to come up with that one. So $50 a week there for a price tag of about $275,000. So we do have the option to continue that if the board would like. Again, that one-time hourly staff stipend there, that's the one that we typically give in December. And then the bus driver attendance incentive. There's the option to add the teacher step for next year, worth about $557,000, and 500 one-time stipend for all professional staff would be about $625,000. So as I stated before, if you look at the little sheet down here where it says option planned use of fund balance, we can continue to offer or reinstate those stipends and the attendance incentives for our drivers. And I just, if we choose to include the stipend for the hourly staff, we could certainly do so, and the teacher step as well.
So when you say teacher step, what do you mean?
That means that they get another credible year of service. And if you recall on the teacher salary scale, it's year 0 through year 30 or 40, I believe. And every step, there's about a $300 or $400 increase, depending on what step you're on. So one step, Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, some steps could be maybe $200 to $250. Some are 3 and some are 4.
So I know what that is.
Okay.
But what I'm asking is, what does this mean? So is the assumption right now that we're not giving folks the step?
We're not required to give a step. Everybody gets a credible year of service. That's non-negotiable. Like you get another year, you're here.
You get another year of service, but not necessarily an increase in your
correct
salary.
Correct. We're not required. School districts are not required to give additional monies, but it's traditionally we should, or we do. So,
okay.
I don't know if there's anything you want me to add to that, Ms. Carabine.
Yes, Dr. Harlan, we appreciate your comment and your question, because it is traditional, and the Bryan ISD Board has typically voted to make this happen. But in light of what's happening in every district across the state, and everyone's trying to reduce their deficit budget and balance the future budget, everything that we've ever done traditionally with compensation and hiring and purchasing, et cetera, has been scrutinized. It's really unfortunate that we're in this place with inadequate funding. So we wanted the board to understand that we have some considerations here that we could do that would be very typical or traditional and well received by our staff. So it's just something for you to contemplate, and I know tonight's just an information, we're not making any decisions, but when Ms. Friddle comes back into the boardroom in June, she will actually ask you to consider adopting the budget. So now is a perfect time to ask questions and give feedback and talk about the possibilities, because besides what she put at the top, these are all things that we could possibly afford, as she mentions, with fund balance, because it's looking like we'll add money back to it, compared to the bottom option. And I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Friddle, because with all that strategic planning, Dr. Merrill's right. We have talked to so many groups of stakeholders, focus groups, parents, superintendent advisory, faith-based leaders, students, you name it. And we're trying to explain school finance, and they're asking really great questions like, well, how do you reduce your expenditures? And then once we talk about what we're doing there, then they say, how can you generate revenue? What do public schools do to get any extra money? So, Ms. Friddle, I'll turn it to you so you can talk about what has recurred over and over in these conversations.
Yes, Ms. Carabine, thank you for that. Yes, so we have been meeting with our strategic planning groups, our finance focus committee also. We began by educating the entire group on just how school finance works. We started with School Finance 101. We talked through the basic allotment. We broke down the tax rate so that they understood, and we talked to them about what it means to be in a deficit budget. So we broke that down, we defined it for them, and the natural conversations just kind of evolved around, well, how can we close that deficit? What options do we have? And that's just where the conversation just kind of organically became, and I started, kind of talking through some of those options, talk through some of the local sides. On the state side is really just driven by student count, so we educated everybody on that process. And naturally, the VATRE discussion started, because that's one of the main revenue drivers there, and it's one of the ways that we can make, a meaningful impact on the local side and the state side. So we talked about what that meant. We talked about the financial impact. We talked about how much additional revenue that could potentially generate for the district, recurring revenue. And yeah, so that's certainly an option. And if the board were to want to pursue that option, we would need to make a decision by August 17th. We talked through the timeline with the group as well. And again, in one of our last meetings, we also discussed, just again, around compensation. We looked at what some of our peer districts around us were paying our auxiliary employees. We looked at the teacher salary schedule. So we were able to make a lot of comparisons, and they were actually very surprised to see, you know, when you look at the tax rate and you look at those starting teacher pay, in a lot of instances, there's a direct correlation there between tax rate and pay. So
I do want to say that, just for the record, in almost every single strategic planning meeting, there have been one or two of us, board members, in those meetings, because we are part of the community and we want to learn. But I do want to mention that a lot of what you're talking about is not brand new to us.
This process, honestly, these questions came up when you think about even strategic planning before the bond. And we asked everyone that was a part of that group to sort of move the questions over here, and we would eventually get back to them. And so I appreciate very much that group doing that. And we've actually convened even a more diverse and larger group of individuals. And we started as a whole group, and then we had really 3 different categories: financial, operations, and academics. And the financial group has been meeting more often, and they're the largest of the 3 groups, while the other 2 have been looking at the operations side and the academic. And as those go hand in hand, we've just, through the leadership of the financial piece of that, we've been bringing that to them as well. And so they're almost lockstep with one another, and this next Thursday they will be back as a whole group together. So this entire boardroom will be full of just community members and students. It's been a wonderful process to have everyone that's really a part of this community, including our students. And I've shared this story, but the very first question that we got when we started strategic planning over a year ago was centered on this very question of how to pay teachers more. And it was one of our own Bryan ISD students. They submitted the question online and asked if we could use the bond for that, which clearly we could not. And in talking to him and his mother, I let them know that we would eventually get to that question, hopefully. And here we are back again doing that. So I'm thankful they're asking the difficult questions. They're pushing back and making sure that all angles have been looked at. And we appreciate that so very much. That same process was done last time, which led to the bond. And again, we'll see where this one takes us. But we're very thankful for the group of individuals that have met and that are giving us that feedback to be able to help us, guide us as we look for this and all decisions as we move into next school year. Strategic planning is not something that really ever stops. It's something that we continue to do throughout the year, and it doesn't always mean that it's going to lead to an action item. What it may lead to is just greater understanding and feedback of the current state of our district and the perspective of our students and families.
thank you, Dr. Merrill.
Norma, I have one quick
Yes,
question. Oh, and I want to go back to Julie's, one of the things that she was bringing up. So if this board said we want to include the teacher step and the $500 one-time stipend for professional staff in the draft budget in option A, that would, I just want to make sure I understand this right, have a net effect of about an additional $1.8 million in expenses that would reflect basically us passing a $2.2 million budget deficit.
Correct.
And I guess my question to that is, what impact is out there from us or any other school district passing a budget deficit in consecutive years, or is there anything?
Honestly, other than just a depleting fund balance,
Okay.
there's really,
Doesn't impact our rating, doesn't impact bond,
No,
any
sir.
of that stuff. Okay, thank you.
Since it's in the neighborhood.
these days.
Hello. All right. I got to get at least a short speech in here. That's not so much a question, but some of the stuff we're talking about, it sort of makes it sound like, well, this is great. We went through this process, and so, everything's going to be okay. I think some comments have been made that that's not really the case. It's, we're having to make hard decisions, but it's, what I struggle with is, this would be an appropriate discussion if the state was financially stressed, when it doesn't seem to be that way at all. The state seems to be doing great and had some big surpluses and a giant rainy day fund and all sorts of things that doesn't appear to support the idea that, oh, they're stressed, so we need to be stressed. And of course, I'm thinking, does the attitude of the legislature and the governor's office still want us to be the best public school system in the nation or not? And can we be, if we're put in a position of just simply doing the best we can with inadequate funding, which seems to be what we keep struggling with, is they're not giving us enough to maintain a good, to treat our workforce properly. Bus transportation is an example. We're spending over $8 million, correct, on bus transportation, and we're
8.4.
getting from the state 1-point-something million. So, what in the world is that about? That we're supposed to use what little we got extra out of the last legislature to pay all that and still compensate our custodians and our new teachers and so on. So this is a frustrating process, and the fact that we have done, and you certainly, Norma, have done so much to get us through this, it doesn't make it all okay. It doesn't make it all okay. It's not, the state is not putting children first always. We are, but they're not, and that's an embarrassment. So yeah, we're going to keep going, and we're going to open schools next fall, and we're going to do the best we can. But if anybody hears this or sees this, I would hope that they would understand that these are desperate times and they don't need to be, but that's the position we've been put in.
Yeah, it's on. For 25-26, we didn't do the teacher step, correct?
Correct.
And we didn't do the teacher step because most of our teachers got designated money from the state.
They did pass through, yes.
But not everybody.
And the ones that did not, the board took action to take care of those employees, right? So the money that the state did not, or the employees that the state did not give us funding for, like our 0-year teachers, you guys as a group, counselors, nurses, all of those people, you guys as a group opted to take care of those people. So yes, you are correct.
So for 25-26, it's not really the whole picture, because it just says $500 one-time stipend for all hourly staff, bus driver attendance incentive of $50 a week. But we did some other things there related to compensation.
Oh,
right?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. It would help me to see more of what we did last year because, yeah, I mean, it bothers me to think about all of our teachers, not just baby teachers, but any teacher that has been here a long time doing the things and is not, if they're probably going to make less the next year because taxes and insurance will go up,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Inflation.
And let's not forget inflation, which we're all having to deal with, but remind us the difference between all hourly staff and all professional staff, like who's in those categories?
So all of our hourly staff are people like our bus drivers, our clerical staff, custodians, most of our maintenance and operational staff, if you're making hourly wage. Professional staff is everybody who's on salary, teachers, counselors, nurses, librarians, all of the executive staff,
Where did
principals,
paraprofessionals fall?
hourly.
Okay.
The graphic is on the screen that we use for our road shows that we've gone around, And this graphic, I think we released on social media as well, but we've used it in all of our conversations for strategic planning, really across the district, to be honest.
And that was for last year?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what we did last year? Okay, yeah. And just one other question I had as I flip back to the page where it says adopted budget 25-26. When I look at revenues, I anticipated seeing decreased revenues this year for predicted because of the drop in what we anticipate for average daily attendance.
Yes.
But what I see on here, and I know I just asked this question, but I'm still confused. Like, why are we predicting revenues to go up for local and state?
Okay, so on the local side, we added in there's the sale of property there for the grounds building. We estimated an increase for facility rentals as well. There's the GASB 96, the lease accounting entry that you're going to see an offset for. There are some items that were not captured on the 25-26 budget. And again, it's a budget philosophical thing. I prefer to budget with them than without them. So it doesn't mean that we're going to receive additional revenue necessarily. For example, on the state funding side, there's an additional $1.6 million in there for the Medicare Part D entry. So it operates just like TRS on behalf. There's a revenue and an expenditure.
Right, so it's just an offset.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not real money.
Yes, I did a lot of right sizing
Okay.
and correcting the ship with as far as accounting entries go. It's just some things, again, it's just philosophical. I believe that they should be budgeted on the front end and monitored throughout the year instead of just budgeting on the back end.
I just don't want people to get the wrong idea in thinking that we're seeing a likely decrease in average daily attendance and yet an increase in revenue. The state isn't doing anything different this year than they did last year in terms of how we're funded. So these are just things we're doing a little differently to try to make up the difference, recognizing we're going to have a decrease in average daily attendance, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do I have any other questions? Sorry, thank you.
I just want to make sure. Thanks, Clay. So of the $419,000 deficit on the prior page, the options for 2026, 2027, which is, there's 4, those are not currently reflected in that budget, correct? Okay.
To point this out, y'all said it a minute ago, we're still going through the process of looking at everything. So some things just may take a little longer. We've engaged transportation to look at just efficiencies as well there, and those conversations take longer just to make sure that we don't have any unintended consequences that we're not aware of. And so even as we finish this year out, we'll get a clear image of where we stand, and then moving into next year of what our expenditures might be or anything that we might be able to change or adjust to be able to reduce that at all.
Thank you. Dr. Harlan, I also just switched over to some of my notes here. Some of the increases there are, I also allowed an estimated increase for additional TIA. We also received almost $1 million worth of additional TIA this year, so I budget that for next year. So again, any increases related to TIA, I'm budgeting for them on the front end. So that's just an example of when I say right sizing some of the things, I'm actually including some things in the next year that were either not included this year. And on the local side there, about $700,000 is on our GASB leases. Again, it's just their paper entries. We have to include them as part of our revenue according to new GASB rules. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get more money in the bank. It simply means that we have to account for those entries on the books according to GASB rules. I hope that helped. We're also on the SPED, on the special education side, I was very conservative, but I did include a small increase, and Dr. Warren can probably speak to this. The funding model is changing for SPED. We've been guaranteed that we're going to get at least the same funding levels, but I did include a small conservative increase for the new tiers of intensity model that we're going to be funded on. So there are some legit increases, but those are just HB2 funding elements that were not going to be active until the next year. So there are some items there that, again, I like to budget for them on the front end, watch them, monitor them closely throughout the year, and then if there's any amendments to make, I can certainly keep the board informed throughout the year. I hope that helped a little. Yes.
Ms. Friddle, regarding compensation, when I went out and about on some of my road shows, there was some confusion among our teachers because of the different pay groups. For example, if you've been in the classroom 5 years or more, last year the House bill afforded them a $5,000 raise. It was a pass-through. They gave us the money to give to them, and then the $2,500 for the other category. Some of the teachers were confused, and they thought that was a one-time, and they'll just never see the $5,000 again. Can you remind our board and our community listening in that that's not a one and done, and that it lives on? You want to explain what they meant with the House bill?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. Thank you for that reminder. So all of the funding elements that House Bill 2 introduced, such as the teacher retention allotment, those monies live forever. So it's kind of like getting a raise. It was a pass-through. So the state gave us those dollars, and then we turned around and we gave them to the teachers. So that money is actually staying. It's counting toward their credible years of service. It's counting toward TRS and their retirement. And also the district that the raise that the district gave, our 0-year teachers, years 1 and 2, all the increases that the district actually paid for those raises are also, they'll live forever.
Yes, and we're grateful to the board, and we made sure that our teachers understood that if you were 0, 1, or 2, the state didn't really give them anything. So thank you to our board for matching what the 3 to 4 year teachers received, and then the 3% for all other non-teacher groups. So everyone, when we went out and explained all this, they were reminded how fortunate we are that the board really took care of them last year. To Mr. Stasny's point, we find ourselves back at a crossroads. We're in a biennium, which means not any additional money coming in. So we, like all other districts, are left to develop a budget in a biennium with no additional funds while trying to combat inflation. So it's quite the dilemma.
I'm sure some teacher out there has this question, so I'll just ask it. I was a 4-year teacher last year, and now I'm a 5-year. Do I get the extra bump?
You are going to get the bump, and the state's going to pay for it. Did I say that right, Tommy? Mm-hmm. Okay. You are going to get the bump, and the state's going to pay for it. That's actually an excellent point. We, as part of the TASB salary study, they were actually able to estimate how many of those particular instances were going to happen, and they gave us a dollar amount for that. And
same on our, they didn't give 1 or 2 year teachers anything. So if I was a 2-year teacher last year, and now I'm
year 3,
that I get another.
No, you stay.
Okay, but the state's paying for that one.
State's paying for it, we're not paying for it yet.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, great questions. Mm-hmm.
All right, just reading this, since I'm new here. Option to continue is the same thing, and then to add, it would add another 1.2 million to the option that we did last year?
Yeah, yes, sir.
So it'd be like a $2 million.
Depending on what the board would decide to reinstate. So we can reinstate the $500 one-time stipend for the hourly staff and the attendance incentive. In addition to that, that's what I was making sure. If we would like to add, if the board would like to also give the teacher step, just wanted to make them aware that was $557,000. And then if the board were to want to give the $500 one-time stipend to all the professional staff, meaning all of our salaried staff, the price tag on that would be $625,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, any more questions? These are really just compensation considerations. One of, as you can see, without any compensation, we landed at negative 419,000, which I believe is incredible progress considering where we started and everything that we have done just as a team. We've had some difficult conversations along the way. Ultimately, we know that this, we are in the people business. This is all about people. 86% of our budget is payroll and staff, and people are, they're at the heart of our organization. So throughout this entire process, we've tried to be, fiscally responsible and also we want to take care of our people for sure. We know that that's the priority of the board. And we've had a lot of great discussions at our strategic planning sessions as well. A lot of great ideas have come from that. Great discussion. We passed out a lot of our TASB, those budget resource tools, and they've been greatly received. They've been very, very helpful. They've been great resources. So this is just a summary of where we're at this point, the methodology that we used to get here, and we're trying to be as transparent as we can. Again, we're budgeting on an ADA. That's our lowest point this year. And in all transparency, there's always the possibility that it could dip lower than that. So when we say that this is the crystal ball moment, it kind of is. And that's why I thought it was a very good idea to bring, again, on page 2 here, all of those budget assumptions that we have to make at the beginning. Again, and here we are almost a year and a half prior to anything happening. So one of the most difficult things for any CFO across the state, again, we're leaving nearly $15 million on the table. To Mr. Stasny's point, we are severely underfunded. If we were funded on enrollment, we would be about $15 million in the positive right now. Unfortunately, we're not. We're funded on attendance, and that is just declining across the state. Again, for many, many reasons. We've talked through those reasons throughout our strategic planning sessions. So it's been very helpful, and I think that it's been good for us to be out personally at all of our campuses and speaking to our departments and just speaking to them personally, educating them on what a biennium is and what it means to not have additional funding on the second year. And, a lot of states, legislatures meet annually. So they go through this process once a year. Unfortunately, Texas meets every 2 years. So we are entering the second year of the biennium with no new funding levels and declining enrollment and declining average daily attendance. So have we had to make some difficult conversations? Absolutely, no doubt. But today's conversation was really centered around where are we at, what have we done, and we have some compensation considerations here, and we'll be bringing back some more information to you at our next meeting. We just kind of wanted to, get feedback today and read the room, see what questions came about, and if there's anything else that we could help address, any more information that we could give the board to help them make the best decisions moving forward. Ms. Carabine, would you like to say anything else? Did I miss any? Oh, I'm so sorry, Ms. Waller.
It's okay. In our strategic planning meeting the other day, I was attending, and everybody at the table, parents, staff, understands that the bond passed, yay. The bond was about buildings, and now, even on this last page, we've been talking about compensation because you can't pay our people with a bond.
Correct.
There's a lot of mistaken identity that are thoughts that you could. So since our Bryan community helped us pass that bond, as I say, bond was about buildings, now it's about our people. And everything we're talking about, everything we're thinking about, along with the budget, is how can we compensate our people, our humans. So whether it's everything that's been thrown out there, all the different options. VATRE is talked about a lot in those strategic planning meetings. But, and I'll say it one more time, the bond was about our buildings, and now we're talking about our people. The legislature, we were waiting after the bond, hoping we would get money to compensate our humans that work for us. And the legislature saw that that wasn't important. So since the bond, we have not been blessed with the legislature giving us money for our staff, faculty, which of course trickles up and down to our students, our community, our parents. So now here we are in this meeting, and again, it's all about our people.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Ms. Friddle, do you mind giving us just a high level, we're talking about, when we talk about VATRE, we're talking about the potential of 2 cents that's not subject to recapture. What is, I guess, what does that mean for the average homeowner in Bryan, Texas? What does that equate to in terms of additional tax revenue received by the district? Just not too far into the weeds, but a pretty simple explanation.
Yes, sir. Great question. So we did go through an example like this with our strategic planning group. The example that we used was a home valued at $350,000, and we applied the standard homestead exemption to that, leaving the taxable value at about $210,000. So based on a taxable value of $210,000, we estimated an increase of about $42 or $3.50 per year.
Okay. So $3.50 per month or $42 per year on average for the average homeowner?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir, that is correct. I'm so sorry about that. My mic kind of went dead there. Yes, so this is the example that we shared at all of our strategic planning meetings and several other meetings as well. So we used a $350,000 home. As an example, we applied the homestead exemption to arrive at a taxable value of about $210,000. Simple math, you divide that by 100. We apply our tax rate to every $100 worth of valuation. So at our current tax rate of about 94 cents, the taxes would be $1,988. And if you apply the 2 additional pennies to that, that takes us to a total of about $2,030 for an annual increase of $42 or $3.50 monthly.
And how does that translate in terms of tax revenue for the district?
For the additional 2 pennies there, that it translates to about $5.5 million. Split out local share just on the tax collection side, about $2.5 million, and then the state's share is $3 million on top of that. So for a total of recurring $5.5 million, if the board should elect to call for a VATRE.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Friddle, I remember at our last strategic planning meeting, there were several parents in attendance, and they were very appreciative of this information, and they expressed their concern about, they don't want to diminish any of our student experiences. We are so proud of the choices and opportunities in Bryan ISD, but they know none of that is possible without providing top talent. We want to attract and retain a great workforce. So one of their questions was, if and when this ever happened in the district and we suddenly had, the $5 million, what would we do with it? And then you had them complete an exercise. Actually, we've done that exercise now multiple times with different stakeholder groups. We were curious, what would people want to see happen should we generate that type of money? Do you want to share with the board some of the top priorities that surfaced over and over again?
Yes, ma'am, thank you for that. So at one of our last, or second to the last strategic planning meetings we had our group go through a little exercise, and we were curious to know if we did have this extra $5.5 million, how would we spend it, or how would we invest it in? 100% of the committee chose to spend it on compensation, paying our staff. So that was the number one response, hands down. We shared with them, again, what our peers were paying, specifically our auxiliary categories are our hourly staff, our paraprofessionals, our clericals, on the maintenance and operations side, custodials, bus drivers. We were able to share some pay comparisons with them so that they could see how we stood next to some of our neighbors. So with that said, they could kind of see where the gaps were, and some of these positions are some of our highest turnover areas as well, especially when they can go down to McDonald's and make $15 an hour. So we went through discussions like that. We had some great talks, and but yes, the number one thing that made the list was compensation, paying our staff more. That's where they would like to see the investment.
Hello. Just some quick math. If I look at doing what we did last year with the $500 one-time stipend for all hourly staff, the bus driver attendance incentive, the teacher step, and then the $500 one-time stipend for all professional staff, it's over $2 million just to do those things. So, that's just to do, well, I guess the teacher step and the one-time bonus for all professional staff we did not do last year. We have done those previously, though. So, yeah. All of these things cost money.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we will forego closed session this evening.
Mr. Dennis wants it to go a little longer.
So there being no further business, the meeting adjourned at 7:23 p.m.